Okay, I'm going to call the September 11th Patton Township Planning Commission meeting to order. Does anyone have anything to add to the posted meeting agenda? Okay. Hearing none, we'll go to number 2. Which is to approve the minutes from the August meeting. Does anyone have anything that they would like to say about the minutes from the August meeting?
There was a note. This note says that there was should be a correction to the minutes. I don't know if we do that or not. Right. Okay. Well, it said the minutes were incorrect.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. I don't know if we just leave it. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I could be heard. I just said there was a note here that says, from a citizen, that says that the meeting minutes were incorrect.
Oh, no, that's public comment. That's not actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's,
So I don't-
yeah, that's,
Okay.
that's under
Then
public comment.
I would move to approve the minutes.
Okay, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The minutes have been approved. Okay, we will now move to public comment. Does anyone have anything that they would like to comment on that is not on tonight's posted meeting agenda? Is there anyone on Zoom that has anything they would like to say that's not posted on tonight's meeting agenda?
CNET and Patton Township are the only two on Zoom this evening.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I can't see. Okay, hearing none, we will go to item 4, which is the College Township map. And this is just asking for any comments that we have about the College Township map.
I just had one question. The legend on the map, is that legend the same as our map? It looked different, and then I guess, is the map, the walkable map, is that comparable to our Parks and Rec map?
So the map that you're seeing here is College Township's official map. It's
Right.
not their zoning map. Patton Township does not currently have a zoning, or Patton Township does not currently have an official map.
Okay,
So
good to
the
know.
legends are not the same because they're not
Okay.
they're not quite the same maps.
perfect.
It looks like most of the infrastructure that is on here, they were trying to utilize other documents and publications and other planning efforts that had already gone into creating these spaces and these linear connections. So if I'm not mistaken, most of the stuff that is on the Center Region Bike and the College Township pedestrian plan that they just finished, all of that stuff is included on here. That's what they were trying to do with this
Okay.
this update to their official map.
Great, it looks great, I think. I think it was great. A great map.
Do you have any other comments that you'd like to pass on to the board prior to submitting them to College Township? The 3 elements that are most important to Patton Township moving forward, as listed in your agenda, are the Innovation Park access ramp, which is a proposed 60-foot right-of-way with a 10-foot bikeway. There's an amenity that's added to Fox Hollow Road that's proposed as a future bikeway, and then there is an off-road paved shared-use path that's proposed between the Arboretum and it looks like toff trees.
Looks great.
And I might add that the proposed road coming from Innovation Park would be to create a connection directly to the airport. And staff met with the CBICC a couple of weeks ago, and they're going to meet with College Township and also hopefully with Benner Township, and we're going to have a conversation about our planned airport district plus what College has zoned out there plus Benner Township, because CBICC thinks, and I think we all agree, that the airport is an area where we could see some growth if we have the right uses and the right supportive infrastructure. So looking at a way to bolster the air service in and out of State College by having the right kinds of uses in that area and also having the access way. And that road's been long talked about for years through Big Hollow, but it's a bit of an environmental issue with Big Hollow itself. So trying to get that access way, this just kind of puts it out there so we can have some more discussions about it.
Okay.
Is there anyone else that has comments on this? We don't have to take any formal action, so it's just if anyone has comments on anything. Okay. We will now go on to item 5, which is 160 Clearview Avenue rezoning request. And we discussed this, the Board of Supervisors discussed this at the June 21st meeting. We discussed this at the July 10th meeting. Then we referred it to staff, and we had a very thorough overview of things. And then we discussed this at the last meeting and heard public comment focused on this. And we decided to delay this to give us an opportunity to ask any questions about this property that we would have. So I think what makes sense is similar to what we, kind of the same approach that we took last time is I think that if anyone on the Planning Commission has comments, anyone in the public has comments, but I think that we spent a considerable amount of time last meeting with people fully not wanting the rezoning from the public, talking about the traffic situations, the sidewalks, and the stormwater. So I think what's important to remember is I think it's best to know that we have made notes of a lot of those things to try to bring up anything that's new from public comment or from our Planning Commission to talk about this evening. So does anyone on the Planning Commission have anything that they would like to say, and is there anything that staff wants to say before we ask any questions or make any comments?
I just have one thing. Someone had requested the building height for the adjacent R3, and we did find it was originally called the Jefferson Commons. This is from the original site plan. The buildings proposed in that were between 22 feet high and it looks like 38 feet high for reference. And I was also thinking, just for your sake, a standard size mature canopy tree grows to be about 60 to 80 feet tall. A white pine tree at maturity is 100 feet tall. So when you're thinking about building height, if you think about like maple and oak trees and what they look like at their maturity, that'll help to define what that building height, what that scale is. So between what's now called the Bryn, it was the Jefferson Commons, it looks like the highest building is probably about 38 feet in height. And a canopy tree, like a maple or oak at maturity, would be 60 to 80 feet in height. What the zoning ordinance for R3 would propose would be a max of 60 feet.
My question has to do with the memo that was provided, which I thought was really well done. I guess it did leave me with the question then of why we would rezone at this point if there, I know it says, I mean, basically it's saying, let's take time to study this.
Yeah, so what we mentioned in the memo was doing what's called a small area plan. Ferguson did one for Pine Grove Mills, that area. Harris did one for the Village of Bollesburg, that whole area around there, and Half Moon did one. So the whole idea behind a small area plan is that you engage the residents who are all here tonight that live out there, and you sit down with them and you talk about the issues that we've heard, the traffic, the concern about their neighborhood changing, the stormwater issues, the sidewalk connections, other things, and you put together a plan that kind of says, this is what we, Patton Township, and it would be adopted by the board and the planning commission, but it'd be written by the residents, right? The residents would provide all the input. But it would lay out kind of a long-term vision for that corridor. And when I look at, I've only been here 4 months, but when I look at the Wattle Road corridor, it's really a corridor in transition, right? I've been in State College back here since 2001. I was a student when there was only a Walmart there in the 90s. That whole area has grown up, and it's changing. It's losing some of its residential character. Certainly on the Toft Trees side, it's going to have medical office buildings and some other commercial things. So we mentioned this to the Board of Supervisors at their last meeting, and they think this is a great idea to do some long-range planning, because then it makes it easier. If we have something like this come up again, we can say, but the long-range plan for this area, the small area plan says we should really be doing X. So maybe this doesn't fit with that. And with the traffic concerns, the one we did when I was over in Harris Township, we looked at doing a road diet on Bowl Avenue, because Bowl Avenue was very pedestrian and bicycle averse, and people were very concerned about, not being able to ride along that road, not being able to walk along there, and also some turning lanes and some other things. So that's then something that Harris Township can take and use in their planning. So similarly, we've heard the traffic concerns from the residents. We can look at that and look at Wattle Road and look at some long-term planning in terms of what we might want to do. I agree that, maybe that would seem like we should just not do the rezoning right now, but the rezoning, while it doesn't have a time clock, it has, people affiliated with it that would like to not wait 6 to 9 to 12 months while we do the long-range planning. So it's sort of a chicken and egg scenario for the Planning Commission to talk about. You can certainly say, we'd rather wait and see this be done after the small area plan is done. I know that the supervisors really want to move forward with the small area plan regardless of what happens here at this level. So if you guys say no to the rezoning, they still want to do the small area plan. If you say yes to the rezoning, they still want to do the small area plan. So I think that moves forward on its own track. But you certainly can take whatever action you want to take. But this would just help us in the future, because then everybody would sort of be on the same page. And I just don't think, I think, again, limited 4-month knowledge, but I just think that area is going to continue to change. I think that there's pressure in that area with the, residential character that's there now. And I just think that having planning will help us in the future so that we have something to fall back on and say, this doesn't fit our long-range plan for that area.
Would the extension on Wattle to the airport make a difference in that whole scenario?
I mean, it might, right? The airport's sort of its separate own entity over there, and then coming over from Innovation Park. But I think there's pieces, right? The Toft Trees piece is sort of in between that we all need to think about. And one of the things that I've thought about since coming over here is we have little pockets where we really need to do some long-range planning. Toft Trees is a great example. The airport, which we've been talking about, is a great example. And this area is also a great example.
Yeah.
If you do rezone.
Use your microphone.
I'm sorry. If you do rezone, and then the small area planning comes afterwards, are we still, it just seems to me, if it's rezoned and then those uses are guaranteed within that rezoning.
Right, you can't go backwards.
Right.
So this property would, if you vote to rezone, right, and then we move ahead with the small area plan, you can't really go backwards, but you're going to look forward with that whole entire corridor, and you're going to look at all the other properties around it. And then you would be able to pick up some of the concerns we've heard with the traffic and some of the other issues.
So it just makes more sense to do the small area plan first to me.
It does. I mean, it absolutely does. And in the perfect world, and I know Leslie would agree as a planner, in the perfect world, we would have done that ahead of time. But now this request has sort of brought to the forefront, and hearing from the residents, which we appreciate hearing from the people that live in those neighborhoods, I think it pushes it more to the forefront that we need some long-range planning out there.
There have been multiple master plans that have been done for larger parcels or for sets of parcels. There hasn't been any significant planning of what that corridor looks like between them. And that's sort of where we are right now, is we have to backtrack and figure out what does the corridor look like between Toft Trees and between this commercial center where Walmart and Patton Crossing and all of these places are occurring. So as that's being built up, what does that do to the corridor that's connecting them? And what does that streetscape look like? So that's the conversation that we need to have.
Okay.
Anyone else from the Planning Commission? Is Bill on? Bill, anything that you'd like to say on Zoom? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, another one where I just think I think it's important to think about that long term again. I mean, I understand about everybody who's living there now, and I also understand about what the pressures are for that area, and it's going to continue to grow. It's like, I mean, it's in too much of a prime place between the highway and Atherton to kind of not have that happen. So part of me is like, is voting sort of no on something like that? Is it just pushing that down the road where you know that eventually it's gonna, I mean, you might have the same conversation, but you'll have it in 2 years, and everything around you might be zoned for R3 at that point, and you're sort of, and you're not, even though that might be the best thing for all of a sudden you have like one very strange little pocket of R2 surrounded by all of this sort of construction that's helping the whole area.
This parcel is bizarre because it doesn't fit into the rest of the parcels on Clearview Avenue.
Yeah.
That's what the biggest piece of this puzzle is. So the question is, does it fit into the R2 definition or does it fit into the R3 definition? And it is very much a transition. So if by chance the rezoning doesn't occur and it stays R2 and we do the small area plan for Wattle Road, if that looks like it's a higher density, if that looks like it's a mix of commercial and office and mixed use, then that's already built out at R2 and the density doesn't match the rest of the corridor. Or if you do the small area plan and you decide to define that neighborhood and you're crossing Wattle Road and maintaining that, then, and you rezone it R3, then you've already built it out to R3 and it doesn't quite match, but it does still match the adjacent property of the Bryn. And so then you do have that pocket of that slightly more dense scale. When we're talking about density too, you have to remember Patton Township, so R1, R2, and R3 are slightly different densities. R3 is our most dense zoning district, but when you're comparing it to, say, the borough, the density isn't really that dense. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So that's one thing I didn't define very well when I went back and watched last meeting. R3 is Patton Township's most dense zoning district, but it's not really, really, really high density, if that makes sense.
Can you refresh me as to what the maximum on R3 is?
Yeah, let me pull up that slide. Hold on one second.
Yeah, it's in there.
Page 13.
Yeah, I don't know if it's easier to look at your packet or up here on the screen. But it depends on what the use is for R3, on what the density would be. So to compare apples to apples, if you're just looking at single family, based on the acreage of the site, dividing that out, you can get approximately 9 units on it in R2, and you can get 9 to 12 units on it for R3, but based on the way that it's configured, it would be closer to 9 for single family. You still have to maintain a percentage of open space. So you can only have so much impervious coverage, no matter what, whether you do R2 or R3, you can only have so much impervious coverage. So whoever is doing the plan needs to make sure that their sidewalks, the driveways, and the building footprint all maintain that impervious coverage percentage, so it doesn't go over that. Now, townhouses, the reason I did these three, the proposed for single family compares apples to apples with R2 and what's already there. But again, the lot is a little bizarre, so it doesn't quite fit what is already on Clearview. So those are comparing apples to apples. The multiple units, the 13 or more, that's what the proposal is. Again, we can't rezone it based on the proposal because it's all R3 uses. But if you're looking at what they have proposed, they can get 31 units on this site. And this would be a much more dense building type with driveway access and parking lot that meets all of the SALDO requirements, so all the parking that's required, plus they still have to maintain that percentage of open space. So that building plus the driveway, the entrance drive, plus the parking lot, all needs to be within that impervious coverage requirement. They can't go above that. And then the most would be the townhouses. You can get 31 townhouses on there as well, but it's exactly the same. You can't go over the impervious coverage requirement. So there's a maximum impervious no matter what the use is. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Are there any other comments from the Planning Commission? Any other comments from staff? Is there any comments from the general public? Please step up to the microphone. Oh, I'm sorry. Bill, go ahead.
So just a quick question here. When we're dealing with the max impervious, where am I seeing that on this? Is that the 35%?
Yes, it would be the 35%. Here, I'm trying to, so your maximum lot coverage for a load for the R2 is 25%. It would be 35% for R3. Can you see that better?
Yeah, I can see that better. So that would also be 25%, even on a maximum build out R3 with the townhomes. Is that correct as well?
So the townhouses, ironically, they can only go to 25% maximum coverage. So that makes the townhouses much trickier.
Okay.
Because you still have to meet parking requirements and the entrance drives, and then maintain the townhouse standards per SALDO.
And if we were to go ahead and try to make this R3, I mean, would this maximum build out is actually what you believe the 31 units on a townhome would be?
Yes, that is correct. That is based on the, so you have a lot size, and for townhouses, it would just be divided by the acreage. So it was a rough number to come up with that.
All right, and that's also dealing with the parking as well, or is that not dealing with the parking?
The parking is 2.3 per dwelling unit, 2.3 spaces per dwelling unit. So the parking makes it a little bit more complicated. The dwelling unit is independent of the parking space. So whoever is doing the design has to keep all of that in mind when they're making the impervious. So there's actually three numbers that we're working with there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does, because my next question is so realistically, when we're looking at the 31 units on the townhomes, we're actually probably having to reduce that down, because realistically, they're not going to get the 2.3 cars or whatever it is on that 31 unit, on 31 units.
It would be very tight. I think it's doable, but the way that site is laid out, you still have to take into consideration stormwater, and you'd have to have some sort of access drive to meet Clearview Avenue. So it would be very difficult.
So we're not talking 31 units on that, and we are talking 31 units on the multiple unit apartment complex.
Correct.
And then we're looking at maximum build out for single family on both staying there as 9 and staying there as 9 to 12. And what are the parking requirements on the single family detached?
They would be the same. It would be 2.3 per dwelling unit.
Okay.
So the lot size is not necessarily the building footprint size, if that makes sense. So for R3, it's 8,000 square feet that's required for each lot size versus 10,000 for R2. So your building footprint is independent then of your parking. So you can make it work. It's a math equation. And we didn't do any renderings or sketch outs of what this could look like, because that's not really what we're here to decide, but still, I want to make sure you all have the same picture in your head of how this works.
And for the R3 district, we're really only talking about going up to either an apartment building that can do 31 units, 9 to 12 single family homes, or townhomes. And again, I think the 31 units is an overestimate on what townhomes are. So would I be correct in saying that would be probably closer to 25 units at the max once you really factor in parking?
I can't answer that. I mean, I could run some rough numbers for you, but I didn't really look into building that site out with townhouses. You would definitely have to put some sort of cul-de-sac or something in there to make them all fit. But the minimum lot size is 13,500 square feet. So, and I'm trying to remember, I have to pull the ordinance. Yeah, so you would have 3,500 square feet per dwelling unit. So that leaves you sort of a front area for your parking and a back area for like a tiny yard space, essentially. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I'm familiar with the townhomes. Now, on previous maps, the previous map shows this. I know it's currently zoned as R2, but there's another map. The forward planning map actually shows it as moving commercial. If that stays commercial, or if it was to hypothetically be commercial, what fits in commercial right now for that space?
So we didn't really evaluate that for commercial. We could do that. The future land use in the comprehensive plan showed it as a commercial use because it was a radio station at that point, and it was non-conforming within any of the residential zoning districts. So it just made sense to continue that and make that commercial at some point in the future, being that it was a broadcast facility. Beyond that, we didn't do any analysis as far as what could fit there. I think it depends on if it was zone C1 or C2. And again, there's requirements for impervious coverage and your how many square feet of retail you can have there versus hotel versus, it just depends on the use.
Because what I'm worried about is if we leave it as it is right now, this map shows that it should be essentially commercial, even though it's a non-conforming use, unless somebody comes along and wants to build 9 homes there in the R2 setup. And given that we do have road problems with that area in our discussions last month, we're having that any new rezoning would be any traffic impacts and needs to be repaired or changes would fall under the developer rather than the township. Am I correct in making that statement?
If there is so when the traffic impact study would be completed, anything that's found on that traffic impact study that has impacted that development from that site, whether it's an additional, whether it's a turning lane or a different signal or anything like that, that would become the burden of the developer, yes.
Including widening the street?
Yes, if it was linked to the, to this development, to this site plan, then yes. Whatever comes out of that traffic impact study, it would be required from the township for the developer to assume the burden of whatever is required to basically satisfy all of the things that were outlined in the traffic impact study.
Okay, I will be joining you today shortly. Really sorry for doing the remote thing and then the drive down things, family commitments and getting kids to do gymnastics here at Paul Baker. So I'll be there in just a few minutes, so I yield the balance of my time back to the board.
Okay.
Okay, any public comment? Thank you for waiting.
I have nowhere else to go. My name is David Durr. I live at 1780 North Allen. That's part of the Coventry Place subdivision. If you are indeed looking for new information, at approximately 3 o'clock today, a mere 2 hours ago, there was a multi-vehicle accident at the intersection of Clearview and Waddle. The police report probably hasn't even been filed yet. But when it is, take a look at it. Maybe there's a cause listed, maybe not. But the action by this board could potentially make this more frequent. It didn't look like there was any sort of fatalities there. But again, a mere 2 hours ago at the intersection we've been talking about, multi-vehicle accident. So please take a look at it, make the right decision. Thank you.
Just to address that, that incident was between two vehicles. Actually, both vehicles were running the red light. The one vehicle was making a left-hand turn across traffic and tried to beat the light. The second vehicle as well tried to beat the light, and the accident occurred. So.
Okay.
That happens every single day at the red light. They run off.
Please go to the mic if you're making comments.
Okay.
I yield my time. Thank you.
Hold my
Thank
hand
you.
while you're out there. We'll battle together. All I gotta say is, I'm 2 doors up from Waddle.
For,
The game this.
can you please state your name?
Oh, Karen Henry, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
At the game that past weekend, I sat at my window, and on one green light on Waddle Road, I counted. It might not be accurate. About 26 cars lined up on one green light, and another green light, 33. Okay. It's approximately that much when the university lets out also. It's bumper to bumper on Waddle Road all the time. And when the students left this year, we noticed, my neighbor and I, that the traffic didn't decrease that much anymore. And the last meeting, we did not address the second phase of toff trees coming in, which will be more traffic, and the hospital will be more traffic.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak?
Thank you. My name is John Rasm. My wife, Carol, and I have lived at 1772 North Allen Street, which is in the Coventry Place, since 2010. My opposition to the rezoning of the property at the intersection of Waddle and Clearview is based upon my 13 years of observation of the traffic in that immediate area. We attended the previous planning meeting when this issue was discussed, and I was pleasantly surprised by the well-reasoned presentation by the staff and the thoughtful response by the members of the commission. So even though I stand opposed to the reclassification, I will not be as disappointed as I would have been otherwise. At the previous meeting, several speakers referred to the Wattle Road corridor. I'm not conversant with that term, but to borrow it from my discussion, I would be more inclined to look at the impact of this proposal on the Clearview corridor, since the property in question is only accessed on Clearview and not on Wattle. Parenthetically, I would be surprised that there's any more zoned R3s which have access only on residential, narrow, no parking streets. The corridor from the intersection of Wattle and Clearview, traveling northeast to the terminus at Oakwood, is only intended for single-family homes. There are currently 31 access points on this corridor, which are for the single-family homes with the exception of the current property. Under the current proposal, there would be, I think, 37, I could be wrong on that, additional single-family units for the potential increase of over 100% increase on that corridor through one access. Let me restate this. Clearview was built to handle the traffic of 31 single-family homes driving towards an inadequately designed intersection, and this would be an increase in traffic through one additional access. More importantly, this access, providing a 100% increase on that corridor, is adjacent to the previously disguised, poorly designed intersection. A driver heading north on Wattle at the intersection with Clearview has, at the position for the red light, the car is pointed at 11 o'clock, not 12 o'clock. And the driver does not obtain a true right angle until they are in the intersection, thus making the turn difficult for a driver driving west on Clearview. Does not make that stop at that position. My experience is that the vast majority of the drivers do not stop at that designated position. A remedy of moving that position further back is not feasible, so it was then blocked the access to the property on the north side of the road. This is important since this 100% increase in traffic accessing through just one point would cause problems, since most drivers would be making a left from that access point onto Clearview, for this is the access that would take them to the Wattle and Atherton corridor. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment?
Kind of playing off what...
Do you mind stating your name,
Larry
please?
Parco.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Yes, my bad. Piggybacking off what Ms. Collins referred to, based on tonight's discussion, it certainly seems that rezoning this tract before the long-term plan is accomplished is putting the cart before the horse. You've said we can't go back. So if this project turns out not to fit with the long-term plan, we don't have a choice. It's already done. Let's do it right, do the long-term planning, then, if it fits, rezone this tract. Thank you.
Okay, is there any other public comment?
My name is Mike Lebo, and I live at 149 Bolton Avenue. I'm part of the Coventry Place development also. At your last meeting for this, you talked about a traffic study. Have you done a traffic study? Do you know how many cars are going through there in a day?
No,
No?
that would be the responsibility of the developer of the property.
So we did run some rough, oops, hold on, let me scroll out here. So as it was as a radio station, forgive me, there it is. As a radio station, that property generated approximately 80 trips per day.
From the radio station?
From the radio station, that's
I'm
what
talking
it's.
about the traffic going through that intersection now.
Yeah, so that traffic impact study wouldn't be done until a site plan came through. So what we're trying to do is say, as a radio station, that property generated 80 trips per day. If it stays R2 and you build it out as 9 single-family houses, it's going to generate 90 trips per day. If you build it out as a mid-rise max, it's going to generate approximately 140 trips per day as a 31-unit complex as an average. But if it is for an adult facility, it would be much, much less. But we're going to go with 140 because that's what the standard is. We're going to compare apples to apples all the way through. If it was built out as townhomes, it would generate 210 trips per day.
Okay.
That's just based on that property. That's not the cross-traffic, okay?
I just want to say something. So when they're talking about, thank you, when they're talking about what we're seeing right now, those are the numbers that we hypothetically see.
Right.
The traffic study.
Take it out of the air.
We would have to rezone, and then whatever the individual developer is saying that they're going to build there would then require them to pay for a full traffic study, which then would take into account everything on Clairview, everything on those roads, everything that you are all dealing with and suffering with right now. And any changes, from what I understand, any changes that would be needed that they're causing impact-wise would be their cost to deal with because of the rezoning. If we leave it as R2, that's not required, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So if the property were to change hands, right, so it's changed from the radio station to HFL now.
Well, there already has been a
Right.
transfer of property.
Right, which is fine, because it's zoned R2, just like you can transfer your property to somebody. But if HFL moves forward, if they get the rezoning, HFL does a traffic study. So a traffic study, the great part about it is we can study the intersection at the Colonnade where the Penn Highland Micro Hospital is going in. We can study other points along that corridor to find out where the traffic's going, where the traffic's coming from, and then look at what mitigation might be needed. And then the developer would be required to do the mitigation. And so when you do the traffic study too, you don't study on a Penn State football Saturday because we have 7 of those a year. But you
Right.
study when Penn State's in session, and you study morning rush hour and you study afternoon rush hour, and we have specifics as to when we can and cannot count because we want to make sure the Penn State traffic, which as was noted earlier, is heavier. But then you look at the mitigation and the developer does the mitigation. Absent someone putting in a plan for that property, if it stays R2, if it goes R3, we wouldn't have that traffic study done unless the township were to say, you know what, let's do our own traffic impact study, let's look at what we can do, and then the taxpayers of Patton Township would be the ones that would be paying the bill for any improvements. Like, we've gotten grants from the state of Pennsylvania to help with the Wattle Road Bridge. We got grants for the Colonnade intersection. So we would look at other ways to fund it. But having the developer, that's one of the things about development, right? Development has a cost to the municipality, as a cost to the neighborhood. The developer has to bear some of the cost of that, or most of the cost of that.
Okay, and my other question is, do you have a plan of what this is going to look like at all?
So, again, we're looking at just the land use. We're not looking at what it's going to look like. And I know that's unfortunate because folks worry about that, but we have not seen any renderings from the developer. We likely wouldn't see that until they would submit a plan if the rezoning were to go through.
So basically, the plans that we're seeing is just colored blocks. Is it going to be a purple color block, a commercial? Is it going to be a dark red or a yellow? That's as far as our designs are looking at. And I know that's unfortunate because, again, it's cost. So somebody's going to have to pay for what's going to be built there. And when you have something built there, that's when we as a board get to say, well, this has got too much of an impact. This doesn't, to steal the architectural design elements from my colleague down at the end, this doesn't look like it's going to fit what's already there on either side. And, we would like this to maybe something else, and then we do the horse trading of getting something along those lines. What I'm concerned about is, yes, I am concerned that there's a traffic issue. I'm also concerned with there is a lack of affordable attainable housing in Patton Township. I'm concerned about that as well. So we have to balance this, and everybody that's talking about this corridor project, well, if we start looking at it and being honest about corridor project, what's to stop us from doing an R3 then, or commercial, or what's to stop us from rezoning your entire neighborhood to R3 at that time?
Okay.
Because that would make sense. And then you're all going to be back here and you're all going to be really upset with us again.
Well, I'm opposed to this whole thing, so.
I understand that, but would you like to get would you like to get your traffic fixed?
Yeah, I'd like to see.
Would you like it to be fixed by the developer instead of your tax dollars?
Well, I'd like to see it by the developer, of course.
That's something to think about here. That's an opportunity for us right now.
Okay.
I'm going to be very blunt about that. Because this is one of those things, and I see people shaking their head, and I'm sorry, but if we look at Patton Township as a whole, which is this board's, that's why we're here. We're to look at it as Patton Township as a whole, for all the taxpayers. You are the unfair people being impacted. I understand that. Can we get your traffic fixed and also get attainable housing at the same time?
Even if you don't do anything, you have changed that light there. You used to be able to pull up to that light early in the morning, it would switch itself.
Yep.
Now you gotta sit there for 2 minutes either way.
That wasn't my design, that wasn't my choice, that wasn't
I just
brought
wanted to
by
get
this
that
board. I think it's one of
Refer
the
to your
people,
traffic committee.
public works people.
Well, I can answer that because that's real simple. All the traffic timing and so forth of every light in Patton Township goes through the state of Pennsylvania, it goes through PennDOT.
Okay.
They're the ones that tell us what we're going to do with our traffic signals. We own them, we have to maintain them. PennDOT tells us how we're going to operate them.
So what you're telling me is I actually dodged a bullet by not getting hired as one of their attorneys.
Yes.
Okay, great, yeah.
All right, thanks.
Is there any other public comment?
Hi, good evening. My name is Fedor Sinev. I live in Park Forest Village. So, I guess one thing I wanted to talk about is, obviously this whole zoning process is a bit cumbersome and inflexible, it raises a lot of questions, people have a lot of questions about the process, they're very skeptical.
So what's your question?
Like there's absolutely no plan and then you're gonna upzone it, I mean, I can understand being kind of uncomfortable with that, but I don't have anything against housing or affordable housing. I don't think it's gonna ruin the sort of old town character or neighborhood of the area, But I did notice one thing. I did open it in Google. I did open the location in Google Maps, and I saw absolutely no sidewalks, nothing for bike paths. I didn't see anything for no bus stops, and you have this arbitrary parking minimum requirement that's 2.3 per unit, right?
I wouldn't say it's arbitrary. I would say that there's a mathematical equation for it.
Well,
And
so they
there's-
say, but that's, there's some subjective kind of.
I would say it's in the code and it's in the requirements, so I wouldn't say it's subjective.
But, I mean, do we need more parking lots and pavement all across Patton? Do we really need that?
So what's your question or statement?
Well, here's the thing, this whole process is kind of awful, but, Yeah, it's no wonder that it'll probably generate more parking if you, build up more parking spaces. It's gonna cause some drainage issues. It's gonna increase, like, there's gonna be environmental problems with that, And, again, I'm not opposed to more housing. I'm not opposed to upzoning it in theory, but you have to look at those sort of things, I mean, I guess you guys don't have any much control over that, but there needs to be some pressure, to have more reasonable flexibility. I don't really understand why zoning law has to be this rigid. It surprises me sometimes. But thank you. That's it for my comments.
Thank you.
Jim?
Ms. Vargas, could you quickly explain how our hands are tied by MPC in Pennsylvania?
Sure. So the state of Pennsylvania requires that if we have a zoning ordinance, we have to provide for every possible use we could have within the township. We have to provide setbacks. We have to provide regulations for what you can do with your lot.
Who does?
The state of Pennsylvania. So we are the lowest form of government within Pennsylvania, and our hands are tied by PennDOT, our hands are tied by the Pennsylvania Municipal Planning Code. Pennsylvania is a pro-land use state. One of the reasons we don't see a rendering at this stage is because we can't simply turn something down because we don't like it, or we don't like what it's going to look like, or we don't think it's the right thing for our community. We have to look at other reasons why. We have to look at the land use. In New England, they can go to the town meeting and they can turn down a plan because they don't want it. We don't have that ability under the law. If we do something like that, it goes through a legal process. There's a curative amendment. We have to have parking. We have to provide for stormwater. We have to, yes, we could do more with sidewalks and bike paths and amenities out there, absolutely. But no, there are things we have to do because of that law, and that's where the zoning ties our hands. And the law ties our hands.
Okay, is it all right if I ask a question?
You need to come to the
You need to
microphone.
come to the microphone so we can hear you.
So yeah, hi, Fedor here again. I have no problem with that explanation. Maybe the law does tie your hand, but I mean, I'm curious what the council's thoughts on that are. Do you feel like it causes issues, or how do you feel about it? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think that's a discussion for this evening when we're talking about the
Okay,
zoning.
okay, no problem.
That's a future discussion.
Okay, no problem. All right, thank you.
Any other public comment?
Hi, good evening. My name is Evan Norfolk. I live in the development also. I think the traffic issue has been hit ad nauseum. Not going to revisit it. I think the gentleman made a very good point about doing the planning first and doing the study first prior to actually making decisions that you can't reverse. I think that was important to point out. We have little kids. There's park nearby. Again, I think even with the traffic on Clearview, that's concerns for us, obviously. One other concern is just looking out the window and seeing a very tall building, and I think you referenced the height, with the R3. So I did want to highlight all those issues. We were also against it, and so I thought it was just important to address as we wrap this up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
If I
Okay.
could, I do have
Sure.
one thing I want to point out. As we were talking about the traffic, one thing that I did not highlight is that the access on Clearview, or actually on any of the other roads, this is almost a separate neighborhood that sits off of Waddle. There's no through traffic in this neighborhood. So I just want you to keep that in mind also, because I did not highlight that in my analysis, but this isn't a great image. Let me find a better one here. Here, this is a good one. All of these streets loop back on themselves and all have to come back out to Waddle Road to go anywhere. So there is no through traffic in this neighborhood, just as an FYI.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, is there anyone else that has a comment from the Planning Commission? Do I have a motion to recommend to the board?
R3.
I'll be the second rotten person.
Okay. I have a motion and a second. Any other comment? Okay.
I have a comment.
Sure, go ahead.
We've heard about the issues of traffic. I feel that this is at least one of the best ways to help remedy that situation and put it on the developer's dime and not the taxpayer's dime. We still have a point that we're going to come back on this, and it's a very difficult lot to deal with, even for an R3. Who knows, maybe if HFL doesn't want to develop it later on when it gets tied up with various opinions and issues, maybe the Viero people right next door would want to take that piece of property over, and then all the traffic issues move off that road because it wouldn't connect, potentially. So there are options here, but we have an opportunity to get the traffic fixed on the developer's dime. We have the chance to get a traffic study on the developer's dime to actually save everybody money and to get this fixed. And, you know, if we have to, maybe we push it to be still the 9 single-family homes that are still there in the R2 or R3. Because I believe at that point, when we start seeing things, we have some more issues to tie them up with. We have a little bit more leeway. This is the chance to get more sidewalks there and get more bike routes there and get a properly set out bus stop there. There are advantages to this. And I believe even if we were to leave that property alone and do nothing with it, we would actually see an increase in traffic no matter what. Because everything around that corridor has developed. And unfortunately, people are going to use that corridor from Waddle to get to Walmart, whether you like it or not. That's going to happen. I do, you know, if we leave it alone, my feeling is it's probably going to be, somebody's going to push for it to be commercial because it was always shown on a map as commercial. And then we have some other issues where we have to kind of look at how many feet away is it from that church up there? I've already had some people talking about that in your development. Well, what could it be if it was commercial? They threw out, could it be a strip club? And my question was, well, is it within 1,000 feet of the church? And I don't know. And that concerns me. I think this is a good chance to fix a lot of things there. And also, we all talk about attainable housing. HFL has in the past done attainable housing projects, and when they say they're going to do this, that's what they do. If this was a different developer, maybe we have an issue. And then lastly, if it's going to be attainable housing for over 65, 75, 85, a lot of those people aren't driving, and that's going to be a lot less of a cost, especially if we can get a bus stop there. So I ask my board members to put our votes where our mouths are for once and do something about attainable housing. Thank you.
I also have a comment, and I think things can be rezoned at any time, and I don't think there's a need to rush anything. And I do believe that we have to have a comprehensive small area plan in place to decide what we want this area to look like. And then if we decide, you know, a year down the road, 2 years down the road to rezone, then we can look at it then. But I think we need to have a clear sight of what we want this area to look like before we make a big decision like zoning that impacts a lot of taxpayers in the area as well.
I'm torn. I totally agree with what Bill said. If we want to get things done, this is the way to get it paid for and save taxpayers money. I am on board with Sharon because I think if we rezone and then we made the wrong choice, we can't go back. Is it the wrong choice? I don't think so, because I think this development is going to be either commercial or it's going to be R3. And I think the more we see that, the more we see businesses going in, toff trees, the medicals, I think we're headed that way, and it's just prolonging it. So I'm in the middle. I totally am. I am going to vote with Sharon.
I might have a rebuttal and try to change your mind.
Okay.
If we wait a year and a half, HFL might not be the people coming and asking for this. It might be Bob Poole, and it might be a large storage facility. It might be, we're going to build a 5-story, well, I was against that, sorry.
You're scared.
Yeah. But I know that we don't have the ability to say, hey, if we do this rezoning, you're going to build this. That's not allowed. Otherwise, we would have an easier time here. But we do know what HFL has done in the past. They seem to have always said, this is what we want to do, this is what they do. We're not getting an issue with a bait and switch here. That can happen, but assuming that they do what they say are going to do. And again, HFL has, from what I've seen, done that. If we wait a year, HFL is probably not going to be the developer, and the next developer in is going to go for maximum profit. So that's why I do feel that this is a point to rush on. And as you said, it's going to be R3 or it's going to be commercial.
Sure. So if it went commercial, let's say we send it over to commercial, wouldn't that commercial business have to do the same issue or same kind of construction?
Right, so I want to make sure that we all understand. So yes, if you rezone this to R3, right, if we rezone to R3, you can't really go back. You're not going to take away the R3. But your small area plan that we're doing regardless of what happens with the rezoning, right? I think the supervisors are very committed to that. I think we as a staff are committed. I think you guys are interested in that. And we want to get the residents who have shown up engaged in that. When you do that planning, you're going to look at that piece and go, well, this is R3, and it's next to R3, and it's next to this R2. And then you're going to make a case why you want to see maybe all R3 in that pocket and keep the transition, and why you don't want someone to come in and go, well, there's commercial right there, so I want to put in a commercial business on that piece of property. And you're going to be able to, when future, and I think this is going to happen along this corridor, right? When future proposals come in, you're going to be able to look at them and say, when someone wants to rezone, no, it doesn't make any sense. We've looked at this. This is the buffer transition area, or whatever it ends up being in the small area plan. And Bill's absolutely right with the traffic. There are issues there. I was reminded by Supervisor Trevino, I think it was, that that road needs to be widened at some point. There's a whole pile of things that need to happen. Everything is very expensive, and if we can have a developer to partner with on that, it saves the taxpayers money and addresses the concerns that were brought up. And then, long range, you look at what you want that to look like. Patton Township has grown hand over fist. I mean, I can remember in the 90s when it was Walmart and nothing but Kmart at the other end of Atherton Street. Now look at everything that's in between, right? So everything's sort of in transition. So we want to make sure the next time this happens in this area or some other part of the township that we've done some long-range planning. So that's why it's unfortunate that we can't do this first. I certainly understand, Sharon, what you're saying, but you're also right. If we wait a year or two, this could be some other rezoning request that comes in, and it could be way worse than what it is.
The other thing is that, as I mentioned before, that property is kind of an oddball where it's located. It seems like it was subdivided first, and it became the radio station way back when, and that's just the way it was. It could sit. That's the other thing that you need to think about. It could just sit. So.
Jim?
Quick 2 cents. The Wattle corridor, what was called Wattle Road, is never going backwards. It's going to be worse and worse and worse. And I look at it as R3 is much better than commercial on that corner, because somebody will push for commercial or a big office building. So I'd rather have affordable housing in there for seniors. So, I mean, do it now, do it later. If we stall, just like was mentioned, they may throw their hands up and say, we're done with it, and sell it to somebody else. And who knows what they'll want to do with it. If it's R2 as now, they can go in and put in their 9 units there, and you'll still have a bunch of traffic there.
But if it is zone R3, who's to say that after they see what they're going to be spending and they decide it's not worthwhile, that they put it on the market and somebody's still back here asking us to rezone it as commercial?
But if they do that, you will have worked on your small area plan and you will have a better sense. And I think the thing you also need to remember, when you open it up to R3, it's still residential uses. You're not opening the door to commercial uses. And I think, and I agree with Jim and I agree with Bill, I think the big threat is that someone would want to snatch that up for commercial because they'll think, oh, it was a radio station for all those years. And also letting it sit is not going to be great either for the neighborhood because it will sit, and then who's maintaining that property?
Then it becomes derelict, then we get squatters.
Okay, well, we're not going to go there, but.
I think
Or it gets sold to somebody who wants to stay within the R2 and keep it limited to just a small cul-de-sac or a small little tiny circle with several homes.
But you can still do that under the R3.
You could, but you have a lot more flexibility under the R3.
There can be 101 ifs.
Yes.
Yes.
We have to do what's best for Patton Township.
I know, I've sat at that corner many times over the course of the last several weeks and different times of day.
Are you for affordable housing, attainable housing?
I don't think that that is something that you can mandate because they can say that that's what their plan is and it could, I mean, 9 times out of 10, people are going to get what they can get for their property that they built. I mean, they're in it for profit. They're not in it for goodwill. And unless you're tying, like how people are getting their, I think the only way you can make sure that something is going to be for affordable housing is to have lenders in place or have some kind of lending plan from the state or from the county in place that says, okay, you have to be between this income and this income maximum to qualify to purchase this property or for us to loan you the money for this property. But once you say affordable housing, even if the first round of it is affordable, the next person is not tied into that and they can turn around and sell it and they're going to try to get what they can get for it because that's what we do. I mean, we're always trying to make more on our properties. So I don't think you can, I think the market determines that. I don't think that the township determines that.
I think they were saying that this was going to be a senior apartments. Is that-
Well, that's what they're saying
No,
now.
I believe, Sharon, not to interrupt you, but I believe they've applied for the necessary, what they need to do through the state to do that. I'm sure he's shaking his head.
We're working on that now.
Yeah.
It's happening.
Yeah, they're applying for the financing through Pennsylvania for that.
Does the HFL reps have any more to say on it?
I can. Troy Knack, Vice President of Project Development at HFL Corporation. And as said here before, we have built quite a bit of affordable housing, more than any other developer has since 2013 in the center region. And we do believe that affordable housing is not attainable in a lot of the municipalities. We've done them in Bellefonte, State College Borough, College Township. We've got multiple projects going on. We have a 62 and over project right now that should come online next year. So this is our first and foremost, this is what we're looking to do.
So quick question on back to this lot. And we don't have any plans from you, but you're going through the process to make this attainable or affordable. On this project, is it going to, it's senior apartments, so you will continue to own the property?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
So-
and those governance, they go up, like, you know, the projects we have now, they started at, I think the first one was 20, then they've gone to 30, and now they're 40 years, that they have to be kept as affordable housing under that program.
And those are the previous projects that you have done?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, so they range anywhere from 20 to 30 years right now, so there's not a lot of money in affordable housing, and any of us building them now are not making, like, any money on these projects, they're just essentially just bringing affordable housing to the community.
I just want to say this, that if you make me look bad, I will remember this and never support any of your projects again.
Yeah.
You know,
We're not looking to make a bad situation worse, and we do understand that there is a bad situation there. It's, you know, been created over time through the development of Patton Township, tough trees, and we all see that it's going to continue to grow. I think the long-term planning strategy has always looked at that corridor as something other than what it is today, and I think the October one's probably going to show that as well.
Is there any other comment?
Well, I was just going to mention, so what they're proposing, and again, this is not tied to the rezoning, but just for information, what they're proposing is it's going to be rental and it's going to be verified income through their corporation. Normally, affordable housing, it's deed restricted, or there's some other mechanism at the county level or at the township level that allows people with a specific income requirement to apply, and they're still usually purchasing these properties through conventional mortgages. There's not a specific funding source. There can be specific funding sources, but it's not always necessary. The point is to make houses affordable. So
Yeah,
if
but that's for the first ownership. You can't control it after that.
It is if it's deed restricted. That's what they do in other townships here in the center region. And actually, Jenna, you were at the CRPC, right?
Yeah.
Jenna was explaining that. So if somebody is, so Jenna Wargo is the planner for Ferguson Township, and they have some affordable housing, attainable housing restrictions on whatever is being proposed. So when they have new development coming in, if they're building apartments or they're building a complex, there's a percentage of them that have to be attainable. And they are deed restricted, and that's the way that they control those. Now, if somebody is able to work themselves above that means and they get a promotion and life is great, then there is a way to get out of that deed restriction, and you're able to, there's other mechanisms that, so it is slightly flexible, but the point of it is that you can get people who work in the center region in homes that they can afford.
But I thought she was saying, Leslie, at that meeting, that they found that couldn't be done, that was done for the first ownership only, and then when they went to resell, they did not have the specific small print in the contracts to restrict how much somebody could list that house for. You could control it with rentals, but you could not control it with ownership, because I had asked that specific question at CPRC.
Right, but I think it's tied to what the market is like, and it's deed restricted. So I think it really depends on the circumstances on how all of that works. But I'm sure I can find more information if it's something you're interested in. That's not something that I'm very familiar with, but I can have a conversation with Jenna and figure out exactly what they're doing, or I can have somebody come in and have a conversation with all of you so that you understand how it works. But there are other mechanisms. That just seems to be the most common one that's done here in the center region.
And we also have the homes that the Center County Housing and Land Trust built in Woody Crest.
Correct.
And those homes are attainable units.
Yeah.
And so the housing, and they're cute little houses. The Housing and Land Trust owns they own the land.
They own the
land.
They own the
And then
land.
the property owner comes in and buys the property, and then it stays affordable because when they sell the property, the land stays with the housing trust. State College is a very successful housing and land trust as well, and they've done that all over the borough. And the borough also has, the boroughs put their money where their mouth is. They have a ton of first-time home buyer and attainable housing programs. So that's a separate conversation, I think, from this. But yes, and I don't understand the stigma that attainable housing gets within the center region. We all need to be able to live. Patton Township's motto is that we're a place for all. And if we're a place for all, we need to make sure we're making room for all. And I'm not sure why, again, not just Patton Township, but everywhere in the region, it seems to be a dirty word to say I want to go out and build attainable housing and help folks live in our community that work for our community.
Right. I mean, I'll put it out there. I have a really beautiful Victorian house, and I don't have any intention of moving anytime in the near future from where I live now. But if my husband and I happened to be split and I had to move with 5 kids and I needed a 3-bedroom house, there is no way that I could afford something in the center region. I'm just going to put that out there. I just want you to just understand who you are selling to are the people who live and work here in the center region. They work at Penn State, they work for the municipalities, they work for the school district. It's a significant problem. Because I'm not going to be able, on my own salary, I would not be able to afford a $2,800 mortgage payment. And even with that saved, that's what, $280,000 house? Where can I find a 3-bedroom house for under 280,000? Really? You can't. Bingo.
Do you know how many I've had problems with interest rates is way they are now?
Yes.
So it is desperate for affordable housing. I
Yes.
can tell you that every day.
And like you said, it's going to move to R3 regardless. And we have, not to say we have a fish on the hook, but we have a fish on the hook that is walking the walk, talking the talk, and doing good work. I think we're absolutely stupid if we don't really consider this and do this now. Absolutely. I mean, I know we're not supposed to use the S word anymore. I've got kids in kindergarten. Sorry, Rich, for you being a teacher.
It's okay, I don't teach kindergarten, I did 20 years ago.
Yeah.
That's how I got this hairstyle. Are we, is there any other comment before we move on the motion? Jim?
One other thing. As I made the motion, it's not an easy decision. I'm kind of on the fence. But in the long run, in the future, it's what's needed. And believe it or not, I feel that making that R3 is going to protect your area more than not doing so. One other thing, we are a planning commission that makes recommendations to the Board of Supervisors. The decision is made by the Board of Supervisors. Thank you.
Okay, is there any other discussion before we take a vote? So, just to recap, we are recommending to the Board of Supervisors, who are meeting this Wednesday on the
But
3rd.
they will not talk about this Wednesday.
Right, they won't be talking about it.
They'll talk about this September 27th.
September 27th,
Yes.
right, okay. So, we have a motion on the floor and a second to recommend it to be rezoned to R3 at the 160 Clearwood Avenue. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no.
No.
So we have 2 no, and we have 5 in the affirmative. So this will go to the board as a recommendation, and will go on the September 27th meeting agenda.
Yeah, and just one note for the audience that might want to keep following the process. This will be on the board's September 27th agenda. That meeting starts at 5:30. We have a Zoom link available. It's also on YouTube. And then if they decide to pass this along, it goes to the Center Region Planning Commission, who has to take a look at it. And that likely wouldn't happen until their November meeting, correct?
They would have to advertise, so probably November.
Yeah, and then it would, if CRPC approves, it comes back to the board, and then before the board can take any kind of a formal vote, it has to be advertised, the property has to be posted. So we're looking at into the first quarter of next year when this will likely happen because of the way the end of the year falls and things that happen. So if you're following the process along, September 27th, the Board of Supervisors, 5:30 p.m., we'll put this first on their agenda. They will discuss this request. If they're supportive of this recommendation, then they will move it to the CRPC. Sharon is our CRPC rep, and Sharon will advocate for this request, if it's moved on, advocate for this at the CRPC level, and then once CRPC takes action, it comes back to us, to the Board of Supervisors for action. We'll continue to keep everybody updated. We've been trying to keep our website updated. We'll continue to do that as well, so folks are aware, because we do want you to be a part of the process.
Okay. We have no status on pending items. Other business, CRPC, we have in the attached summary. the board reviewed the sketch plan of the Stevenson church property, and the board also approved the Buckhart Horn for engineering and design services and for the Cricklewood Drive bike path plan. So is there any other business that we have to discuss before we have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
One thing I want to bring up.
Sure.
So last month, we brought up that Debbie was not able to do October, and Ellen so graciously accepted that she could fill in. However, Ellen now has a conflict with her schedule, so we need to have a representative from the Planning Commission as a BOS, Board of Supervisors representative for October 11th.
And just real quick, Rich, are you taking are you still covering the September 13th for me? Because I took one of yours.
September 15th. No.
Or am I doing it? I was just asking you.
I covered last month, I think, for you.
Okay, so then I am doing September. All
Yeah.
right.
Is that okay?
That's fine.
Ellen, I'll take care of that 11th, okay? As long as I can zoom in, I'm good.
Thank you, Rich.
Yeah, is there anything else before we have a motion to adjourn?
At what time is that?
5:30?
5:30.
5:30. Okay, can I have a
I
motion?
did have one.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. In the meeting attachments, there was something about the charging vehicles, the electric vehicle charging systems. And I just wondered, why isn't Patton also getting an ordinance or, looking at an ordinance for that? I noticed there were only...
So the Center Regional Planning Agency, which is the
Right.
agency I work for, they hired an intern, Ben, who was
Yes, I
fabulous.
saw
and
that.
He wrote a draft ordinance
I
that
saw
can be
it.
used for any of the municipalities.
It looked very
So
good.
it's sitting out there, and we can absolutely add it to our work task list. But the meeting tonight, it may seem a little light, but we thought we were going to have 2 additional land development plans on here, but they were not ready to go. So we pulled them at the last minute, and this is why we only have 2 things on here.
Okay.
So there's a lot of outstanding development, so as we're able to, we will incorporate that as a work task in the very near future. But I'm glad that you're excited about it, because Ben spent a lot of time working on it, and it's very wonderful. If you go on to CNET, I believe there is a CRPC meeting from the Center Region where Ben presents his findings and all of the goodness about that, if you're interested.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anything else? Okay.
Sorry.
There's no sorries.
No, that's an excellent question. It's a really cool thing. We run out of time.
Yeah. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
A motion.
Second? All those in favor say aye. Aye. We're adjourned.